let's jump into the subject of today, and that is the study or the understanding of one of the most spiritual texts in the history of humanity, called the Bhagavad Gita. And this text is so important. We even named this meeting, as many of you know, by this beautiful term, which basically is divine dialogue, the ultimate conversation with God, because exactly this is what the Bhagavad Gita is all about. It is not just some vague idea of interacting with God and asking questions. We're talking about the Bhagavad Gita, which is an incredible account of an actual set of events that are known to have happened around 6,000 years ago, more or less. It's hard to pinpoint the exact time, but about that time, some say about 6,400 years ago. And these set of events are part of a greater epoch in the history of India, which is called the Mahabharata. It's actually a very grand tale of the ancient history of India, which describes a kind of conflict between two great spiritual, well, they were not that spiritual compared to enlightened people, but we're talking about very spiritual human beings, because we're talking about 6,000 and more years ago, which is the time of shift between cosmic cycles. Now, I'm going to get back to the spiritual concept to elaborate in a second, but I just want to say, so this makes even more sense to those of you who hear it for the first time, that according to the Indian tradition, according to the Vedas, the Upanishads, especially according to the yogic texts, and very much so mentioned in the Tantric texts, it's also mentioned in the Greek tradition and in other traditions around the world. It seems that many nations were very aware of the fact that the universe operates in cycles. They are called cosmic cycles. Now, each cycle in the Indian tradition is called by the name of yuga, not yoga, which you know what yoga means. This is you with an U, yuga, and yuga is translated as a cosmic cycle, an eon, a period of time, a cycle of time. And there are 4 of these yugas. Each of them is approximately 6,400 years, and putting them all together, which is approximately 25,000 years, plus represent a Maha Yuga, which means a great cycle. If you're wondering, are there even bigger cycles? The answer is yes, but then that takes us to a whole study of the subject of cycles in the Indian tradition. And why did they study the cycles of time? Because they studied cycles of time that are astronomically large, much more than 25,000 years. They reach to levels of, 10 with the 200 potency or something, incredible lengths of time that they've studied. And they also studied very small spaces of time, which are like microseconds and smaller. Some of you might ask, why the heck in the ancient times in India, they would study these microseconds and, trillions of years cycles of time? Who needs this? Why is that important? Answer: it's not important for the average person. But if you are studying the movements of consciousness, which is what the Tantric, the yogis, and some ancient spiritual enlightened beings were studying, and for that, your mind is your laboratory as you go into deep states of consciousness, then actually understanding how time operates on extremely small or huge cycles makes a very big difference for you. It's not relevant for today, so I'm just mentioning the classical cycles, which are the 4 yugas. That's what's relevant for us. They have names in Sanskrit. The first one is called Satya Yuga. The next one is called Treta Yuga. The third one is called Dvapara Yuga. And the last one is called Kali Yuga. Now, I know that some of you have reached your fill with Sanskrit words, so let me translate it to you easily. In the Greek tradition, they called the first yuga that I just mentioned is Satya Yuga. Satya comes from the word Satyam in Sanskrit, means truth, which tells you that this is a cosmic cycle where human beings were very different on this planet. They were of an extremely refined and high quality spiritual level. They may not have had iPhones and all kinds of technology and what we value so much today, no stock market and stuff like that, but they have had enlightened levels of consciousness. In the Greek tradition, that age is called the golden age of mankind. The next one, which is called Treta Yuga, in the Greek tradition, they called it the silver age of mankind. And that means we finished 6,400 years. We go to the next cycle, which is also about 6,400 years. But that one is a metal which is less valuable, still valuable, but less, which shows that now humanity has decreased. And that means humans now are not as 100% spiritual as they used to be. They have more sinful behavior and they start having decadence spiritually. It's still very pure compared to something else, but not as pure anymore. And then the third age of mankind, which has this name in Sanskrit, which is called Dvapara, and that in the Greek tradition actually is called the Bronze Age. Some people call it the Copper Age. We just call it the Bronze Age for simplicity's sake. And the Greeks considered it to be a metal which is even less valuable than silver, which tells us what? You guessed it, human beings are decreasing even more in their spiritual dimension. They become even less spiritual, more sinful, more limited, more impure, and now we're having something which is not anymore as beautiful as it started with. And finally, we come to the fourth age, which is called in Sanskrit Kali Yuga. And in the Greek tradition, it is called the Iron Age. The iron is a metal which is the least pure of them all, the least valuable of them all, because basically the Iron Age or Kali Yuga is the age of a lot more sinful behavior. In fact, it's the majority of the spiritual or lack of spirituality we see there. Now comes the bad news, that we are in the Iron Age of mankind. If you believe that we are in the Golden Age, then you need a serious wake-up call, because we are in the Iron Age of mankind, where we have spirituality at the utmost decline. The bad news is we're not just in the Iron Age, Kali Yuga, we are at the end of it, which means whatever 25% was somewhere in the beginning still there, we are coming close to zero at the end of Kali Yuga. We're kind of scratching the 5% if we're lucky. At this point, you may have finances, culture, technology, all kinds of cool stuff. Wait a minute, what about spirituality? We are in trouble. It's close to zero. What do we find in this day and age? Unfortunately, a lot of new age stuff coming out there, false gurus, false teachers, which teach you anything from aliens to crystal balls to God knows what. And we feel like, oh, we are in a place where there's a lot of spirituality, there's a revival. Sorry, it's the end of Kali Yuga. This is a lot of false prophets and false information. So this is the background, the backdrop to the subject of the Bhagavad Gita, because let me explain. The Bhagavad Gita, which is part of this big epoch called Mahabharata, is taking place exactly at the end of the previous age. The previous age, I mentioned, called Dvapara in Sanskrit, or let's call it in the English Greek reference, just so everyone is clear. The end of the Bronze Age, where we had still the 50-50 kind of spirituality, at least in the beginning of it, as it comes to an end, there's a transition between the Bronze Age to the Iron Age. One thing I didn't mention yet, each time an age is shifting, there's usually major events that happen. A big cataclysm is a common one, big wars, sometimes all of the above, and it could be other things, an asteroid hitting, God knows what, but there's usually some major events that cause, to a large extent, the elimination of the previous inhabitants who now need to move on to another plane of existence. They don't fit to the next age, which will be lower, dirtier. Their soul is more refined usually. And then that means that there's some kind of a reset, spiritual reset that happens. And then the new age starts with souls that are not as advanced because it is going downhill. At the end of the previous age, the Bronze Age or Dvapara Yuga, there were some major events that were happening. There was the famous flood of Noah that you read in the Bible. It happened, not just mentioned in the Bible, it's mentioned in all traditions. In South America, you find mentions of different things of the kind in different areas where they speak of the Great Deluge, which is a great flood that happened at some point as part of the reset. But another major event happened, and that was the Great War, which is the famous war that the Mahabharata text is talking about. I'm telling you about this war because that was a very major event with a large amount of individuals that were killed in that war, and a lot of change took place as a result of that war. And that big war took place as a transition between the two yugas or cosmic cycles. And we have there in the beginning of this big war, as it is about to happen, as the two armies are facing each other, and they are huge armies, one of them is like 4 times or more bigger than the other one. These armies are headed by 2 different royal families, and they're actually part of one family, but they kind of split up. And these are 2 great families that are about to go to war, and that war will determine history itself. Now, at the moment that the war starts, in that time, a great being has manifested on the planet. This great being is what we call in the Sanskrit language, is mentioned in all traditions in India, it is called an avatar. No, that's not the movie you remember with those blue people running around. That's an abuse of a name. We're talking about a Sanskrit term called avatar or avatara, which literally means a descent, and it refers to the descent of God or the supreme consciousness or the absolute, you can call it by whichever name makes you more comfortable. The idea is that the divine consciousness manifested itself through a human body. Just like in the story of Jesus, they say Jesus is actually God himself in a human body walking around doing miracles and so on. And in the same way, when it comes to this individual that I'm about to mention, which you already guessed is called Krishna, the famous Krishna is an embodiment of God, or the Indians call it Vishnu, which is an aspect of God, and this is a reincarnation of Vishnu in the world in a human body. This is Krishna, who is performing miracles and doing incredible things. He kills demons as a baby, and that's only the beginning because Krishna was an incredible being. And this Krishna, as he grows older and he becomes involved, because that's his mission in this transition of the yugas, he is supporting one side of this war, which is headed by 5 brothers, which are called the Pandavas. One of the Pandavas, who is not the eldest, but the greatest fighter of all of them, is called Arjuna, and Arjuna is guided by his guru, which is Krishna. He is his guru, his God, he is his guide, he is everything. So Krishna and Arjuna are about to engage in the war, leading the army of the Pandavas against another army, a bigger one, of the Kurus, they're called, and they are about to start this great war in India. There's a specific place called Kurukshetra, which is the field of the war. So having told you all this background story, now we're actually starting to talk about the Bhagavad Gita. What is the Bhagavad Gita? It is a moment in time which is very critical, because in that moment, the war, the 2 armies are assembled. There are warriors there that are incredible. They make Hercules look like a beginner, They are giants, physically, emotionally, mentally. They can throw energy weapons on each other, which are mentioned in those ancient texts to be weapons of high level of destruction. They use mantras and light the sky. They can do miracles. They are warriors of a high level. We're talking about human beings of a very advanced level, and they are about to start this war, and the armies are assembled. And now Arjuna, who is the Hercules of his clan, a very powerful warrior, an amazing, skillful person in all the arts of war, and he is riding in a chariot, which the driver of the chariot is none other than Krishna himself. And Krishna promised, because of all kinds of agreements between the 2 armies for months and longer than that, there was a lot of preparation for this war, and he agreed that he will not physically participate as a warrior in the war, so he only joins as a driver. So this is basically the beginning of it. And now Arjuna tells Krishna, please lead my chariot between the 2 armies. I want to observe the armies as we are about to start the war. This is legitimate. That's what commanders do. So he does that. Krishna drives the chariot. Arjuna is starting to have a serious emotional breakdown. And he has that simply because the army that he's about to fight is not people that are stranger to him. Actually, all of them, he knows them very well. Friends, well-wishers, family members, gurus, and many other people that are very, very close to Arjuna. They just chose the wrong side because of loyalty and promises and so on. And Arjuna feels terrible. He does not want to hurt these people. These are people that he worships, that he should touch their feet, and he should appreciate them, not fight them or kill them. So he is in a great dilemma, and he basically is in a crisis mode. And then he turns to Krishna and he tells him, stop the chariot. I am flustered. I am a messed up person right now. I cannot do this war. Help me. And that's when Krishna turns around with a smile on his face and starts giving special teachings to Arjuna. These teachings are the most incredible teachings in our known history. And in these teachings, which are a book in itself, a book within the book of the Mahabharata, and that book is called the Bhagavad Gita. It has 18 chapters. In the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna goes through special teachings which are the basis of all spiritual teachings, not only in India, but this is the basis of spiritual teachings that you may find across the board throughout the world. And there, Krishna reveals great secrets. And during that time, Arjuna is sitting there despondent, upset, asks questions, gets answers, and slowly, Krishna takes him out of his despondency, reveals to him the secrets of the universe. No, I'm not just saying it, it's for real. Because Krishna is not just another dude that has something to share. Krishna is literally God in a human body. Just like Jesus, according to the Christian tradition, and many others will agree to that. Even yogis agree that Jesus was indeed a very enlightened being and an avatar himself. Just like Jesus walks around, gives teachings that change people's lives and change history, because he was special, because this is so fundamental to humanity. In the same way with the Krishna, it's the same principle. God manifests in a human body, and whenever Krishna opens his mouth, there is pearls coming. There is divine knowledge coming. There is knowledge that can change the human being's consciousness. It can change everything. And you know what is the beautiful and most important thing I want to share with you today? That is that what Krishna said then applies 1000% right now. So definitely, these are not teachings that somehow get eroded with time. These are teachings which are as fresh, as powerful, as mind-blowing, as able to touch your soul and change your consciousness as they were the moment Krishna opened his mouth back then and said them. They're still as effective today, if not more. And that's why these teachings are incredible. And you know what's the amazing thing? A lot of people don't even know about it. Or if they know about it, they don't bother reading it. Why? Because I was busy. Because, I have Facebook and I've got Instagram and I've got Netflix and I've got stuff to do and I didn't have time. You have here the fountain of knowledge straight from the mouth of the divine consciousness itself, but Netflix is more interesting to you right now. This is the joke of the century. It's incredible. How is it that we are not drinking out of the fountain of God as much as we can? It's there. It's available. Just open the freaking book and read it. And yet, most people don't do it. There's reasons for that. It's not only because we are blocked these days. It's the end of Kali Yuga. People are so distracted. We are bombarded with so much stress. But it's not the only reason. It's also what we call a karmic reason. Karma means action-reaction. It means we all have certain accumulated reactions from previous actions we've done in this life or in previous lives. And if we've done negative actions in the past, we have negative reactions in the future or in the present. If you hit someone, you might think, oh, it's been 10 years since then, nothing's going to happen. Still, something will happen at some point. We don't know exactly when. There's a logic to it which is beyond us right now, at least beyond this lecture. But at some point, the pendulum swings again and you will be hit. And you would say, wow, it's been 10 years. There's no connection. It's just bad luck. No such thing as luck. No such thing as coincidence. Karma will always get you. If you do something negative will come. You do something positive will come to you, or in anything in between. The pendulum of karma always swings. Why am I telling you all this? When it comes to karma, it affects us on every level. your health, the way you look, your circumstances in life, which family you were born to, which country you were born to, what are your current circumstances every single day? Are you having all kinds of problems in life, and which kind? Why do you have problems with relationships? Why do you have problems with money? And the list goes on. Whatever goes on in your life, it's not just happening, whoop-de-doo, just happened. No, it's actually happening because of karma. Every single moment in your life, you see karma blossoming and reactions keep coming. That's why the ancients kept telling us always, be good, do good, don't be a bad person. There's commandments, there's instructions. Buddha says this, Moses said that. All these saints always try to tell us, do good, be a good person. Was it just because they're all some kind of naive individuals who just want to be nice and, square-toed people? No, because they know about karma. And they know the more you do stupid things, the more your life will be miserable. And your next life, and the next life, because you keep carrying your luggage and keep accumulating more garbage. So be smart, counteract it with more positive actions. So that's the idea of karma. Now, one thing I didn't mention, which is critical here, now we come to the point. There's another type of karma which is critical and most important than all other types of karma. And that is what we call in yoga spiritual karma. If a person has negative spiritual karma, to a degree we all have negative spiritual karma, because guess what? We're all in Kali Yuga. If you were born in Satya Yuga, in the golden age of mankind, you have incredible good spiritual karma. But we are born at a time where spirituality is at its lowest. So by definition, we all have some negative spiritual karma. And if you keep living a life at this time in this yuga, which is even more dark, more negative, you cheat, you steal, you do all kinds of violence, you go to war, whatever your reasoning may be, you think negative thoughts, you behave in a way which is manipulative, whatever stuff we do, we keep producing more and more negative karma. And if you do that, at some point the karma will become negative spiritually. And you know what that means practically? A person that has negative spiritual karma will find it very, very challenging to achieve access to spiritual knowledge, to spiritual gurus, at least the good ones. Oh, you'll have very easy access to fake gurus. Oh yeah, negative karma will have you that easy. But what about authentic gurus that actually can take you somewhere real spiritually, progress, evolve? That would be very difficult because the spiritual karma is not good. You have actually negative spiritual karma. I'm saying all that because that explains why many people never even think of reading the Bhagavad Gita. You've got the fountain of knowledge of spiritual beauty here, and you're always busy doing something else. Oh, there's tons of information out there. Just go on Google. But is that real information or just a lot of junk? And actually, there's a lot of limitation with authentic information these days. We are under the illusion that we have access to everything just at the tip of our fingers. But the reality is, the real good stuff, especially the spiritual stuff, is not accessible. You can get access to a lot of confusing stuff, but not the real deal that is hidden. And why? Because of spiritual karma. The Bhagavad Gita is one of those texts that can really be a guide for you better than almost anything else. So that's why the Bhagavad Gita should be studied and taught. Not only that it's difficult because of karma to access it, it's also difficult to understand it for a lot of people. That's why we have decided to do this course of studying the Bhagavad Gita once a week. So not only that you'll have the opportunity to read the Bhagavad Gita, I'm going to give commentaries. And trust me, that opens up a lot of understanding, because some of the terms are not easy for people who don't understand spirituality, yoga, and the various aspects of teachings of Indian metaphysics. And by having proper explanation and guidance, you can then see the truth of the Bhagavad Gita, assimilate it, and then the effects on you would be much more profound. So that's the objective of why we're talking today and what I'm planning to do. Now that you have a proper understanding of what is the Bhagavad Gita, it's a conversation between Krishna and Arjuna. It's basically a conversation or a dialogue with God, literally with God, that explains everything you need to know about what is important. No Krishna doesn't talk about silly things. He doesn't talk about how you should make money or how you should, enjoy sex or whatever people think in modern times, in this dark age of the Iron Age when people are obsessed with money, sex, and all these things. Krishna is not interested in sharing information about such superficial and non-important topics. What he's interested is sharing knowledge about authentic spirituality and guidance on how you can become spiritually successful and make your life incredible. It's better than any motivational speaker you've ever heard in your life. It's better than any motivational book you've ever read in your life. Guaranteed, this is one of the top spiritual books ever, bar none. So I'm really passionate about Bhagavad Gita. I'm really passionate about sharing it with people, and that's why we're here. I want to talk about it with you today. If you decide to join our course and go deep into the Bhagavad Gita, I don't know, because you want to change your life and be a giant, it's your choice. You don't have to. If you want to do that, you're welcome. If you're not interested, that's fine as well. But at least today we have a little bit more time to go into it and understand some of the pearls of the Bhagavad Gita. What is so unique about this text? Well, first of all, as I said, it has one of the most unique things. It is so beautiful. It is so mind-blowing. And that is, it is a direct teaching from the mouth of the divine. Another thing, there are certain spiritual, let's call them codes or cheat codes that Krishna reveals in the Bhagavad Gita. It is hidden to a degree. It is interlaced in a language which is a bit codified. It is not always clear to the Western mind because some of the terms used, many of the terms used, are very much to an Indian person who understands the Indian terminology of Indian metaphysics. And therefore, many people read it and they're kind of, yeah, it's kind of nice, but I don't really know what it means. So I'll just skip forwards. But if you understand how to crack these codes, the information is unbelievably powerful. This is wisdom of the highest degree, which can be applied today in modern life to give you clarity, strength, purpose. How many people don't understand the purpose of their life? They try to go to university. I got a degree. I don't even know if it's what I want to do. Then they try to do something else. Then they try to have a family. Maybe they'll find happiness, but then they get a divorce or the kids hate them or whatever. Life keeps giving you all these weird twists. And that's because it's hard for you to understand your true purpose. What is the reason behind everything which is happening for you? You would say karma. It's true, but there's an even more deep intelligence behind it all. And the Bhagavad Gita explains it. And it's not just a wishful thinking explanation. It is the real deal. This is, imagine, just like in the famous story about the Wizard of Oz, that at some point they reached to the wizard and they discovered that it's just some guy behind the curtain. Well, we are opening the curtain. This is what the Bhagavad Gita does. It takes away the mystic issue behind it, reveals the real mechanisms of how this world operates. What is this reality? What is your soul? What is your body? How does it work? Why does it work this way? For God's sake, it's a manual for what the heck is going on. And that is so valuable. And if you're still confused, if you still don't know why things are happening the way they do, for you, for others, if you still feel flabbergasted a lot of the times in your life, the Bhagavad Gita is your remedy. And that's why it's so important to study it. And I can tell you from my experience, every time I study the Bhagavad Gita, even if it's a chapter I read many times before, it's like I'm reading it for the first time. The knowledge, that's the uniqueness of reading the Word of God. It is fresh. It is incredible. Actually, I would define it even more powerful than that because it's true. The Bhagavad Gita is not a book, I would say. Okay, this is my view. It's not even a book. It is a causal event. This means that this is like an injection that God has put into manifestation. This knowledge, this text, this information, it's like injected by the divine into manifestation. And every time you read it, every time you look into it, it gives you the same impact that it was supposed to give from day one. It is like a never-ending fresh knowledge, and transformation. Every time you read it, your consciousness will shift, will change. Even if you read it 100 times, the next time you read it, your consciousness will shift again. It is a constant nudge to your soul towards enlightenment. It never allows you to be stagnant. How many books do you know? How many texts do you know that for thousands of years have been studied and have benefited human beings or across the world? You might say, the Bible. I got it, the Bible. Okay, you got one. Wonderful. How many more do you know? You can probably count them on one hand, maybe even less. So we're talking about one of the most important texts in history. So having said all that, I just want to first give you a look at one of the versions of the Bhagavad Gita that I recommend. This is how it looks like in case you want to see the actual front and back. And this text is basically what I like when I read the Bhagavad Gita. Personally, I prefer the text. There are many versions of it, of the translation of the Bhagavad Gita from Sanskrit, but I prefer those that come as just pure translation. As you see, it's not a big book, and without any commentaries, because I prefer to do my own analysis when I study the Bhagavad Gita, and I don't prefer to see the commentaries of other people, no matter how enlightened they may have been. That's how I like to read it, pure, direct, just the text. However, there are other versions of the Bhagavad Gita that I highly recommend. There is the Bhagavad Gita translated, and I think it comes even with commentary, but you can just read the translation if you don't want the commentary, by the famous Sri Aurobindo. Sri Aurobindo was an amazing enlightened yogi. There's a translation by the enlightened master Swami Shivananda Saraswati. This is an enlightened master from Rishikesh, India. He passed away already, but still, his translation of the Bhagavad Gita is excellent. And there's, of course, a translation by Paramahamsa Yogananda, also an enlightened yogi, also recommended translation of the Bhagavad Gita. So there's a few options. There's many, many more that I highly recommend. One guideline, if you want to choose a translation of the Bhagavad Gita, choose a translation done by an enlightened human being, not just a scholar. Actually, I prefer not to read translation of the Bhagavad Gita from scholars. I prefer translation from a person who reached enlightenment. Now, one of the things we need to understand before we even talk about the teaching itself is that the Bhagavad Gita would not be a Bhagavad Gita, would not exist without the main character, which is Krishna himself. Understanding the life of Krishna is massive. I'm going to read for you from a book that I highly recommend about the life of Krishna. It's called The Complete Life of Krishna by a lady author. She's amazing. Her name is Vana Mali. In that book, in page 186, there is the description of the philosophy of the Bhagavad Gita and explaining what it is. The philosophy of the Gita, sometimes the Bhagavad Gita is called for short Gita. So if I say Gita, don't get confused. We're talking about the Bhagavad Gita. So she says, the philosophy of the Gita is not for the weak or cowardly person who is afraid to face life as it is. It is for the heroic one who is ready to face the challenges of life in the effort to evolve into godliness. The Bhagavad Gita does not teach an ethical stimulation or sentimentalism that loves to look on nature as good and beautiful and refuses to face her grim and frightening mask. Courage to face existence as it is, we will never be able to arrive at a solution to its conflicting demands, achieved in and through the disharmony that we cannot deny. War and destruction seem to be the principle not only of our material lives, but of our mental lives as well. This is an important sentence that you'll see is actually telling you why the Bhagavad Gita is so critically important. The Bhagavad Gita talks about a war, but it actually refers to a war that we all fight internally all the time at the level of the mind and especially at the level of our souls. It's not just our material lives that are in war. She says, but our mental lives as well. Whenever you want to watch Netflix, instead of doing something important in your life, or watching Facebook, or watching a movie, instead of reading an important book, or instead of spending quality time with someone you truly love, or doing something else which is very important for you spiritually, that can make you evolve in this life. I guarantee Facebook or Netflix does not make you evolve, period. Why is it that we never do the right thing? How can we always fall to do the silly things instead of the important things? Well, there is a voice in your head telling you, you should be doing something better now, but instead you're eating a very unhealthy pizza in front of the TV. Why do we fall? Because there's an internal battle always between doing what's right and doing what's wrong, helping instead of damaging, being love in a loving condition instead of being in ego condition. We have war inside of us all the time. The Bhagavad Gita is a teaching that can help you realize this internal war we always struggle with, and how to become a winner of a real sense, not just, let's make money, be a winner. I'm talking about the winner in life, a winner at the level of the soul. So she keeps saying here, life is a battlefield of good and evil forces. We are placed in the center of this field, now swayed by the good, now drawn by the evil. As in the Mahabharata war, the war mentioned in this text that I'm telling you, the latter, what is the latter? The one that draws us to evil, appears to be far stronger than the former. Always we feel like the forces of evil are stronger than the good. Just like Arjuna, she says, we stand in this no man's land between the opposing forces. Every moment we are faced with decisions and controversies, perplexed and torn between the warring forces within ourselves. We know not which way to turn. We're confused. The famous pictorial representation of the Bhagavad Gita, this war image, in which Arjuna is seated in the chariot with the Lord Krishna holding the reins of the 4 white prancing horses, is an allegory of our conflicted life. The chariot represents the body, with Arjuna, the jivatma, in other words, your soul. Arjuna represents the soul, or the embodied soul seated within. Lord Krishna is the Parama Atma, which means God, the supreme soul, or the cosmic soul, who has ever been his boon companion, but whom he has not recognized as the supreme. Arjuna, even though he knows Krishna so well, still treated him like an average person and didn't realize this is a supreme consciousness. At least at that point. Later on in the Gita, he realizes it. But this is the point we're talking about. The 4 horses represent the 4 aspects of the mind. Manas, which means the mental field. Buddhi, which means the intellect. Ahamkara, which means the ego. And Chitta, which is the mental force. And then some people call it the collective consciousness, but we can leave it at that. This mental equipment drives us like uncontrollable horses. The intellect pulls us one way, the mind field is there, then you have your ego saying something else, then you have your mental force driving you in different directions. Oh, I want bananas. Oh, let's watch Netflix. Oh, I want to learn university. I want to learn a new language, but then I gave up after 2 minutes. And all the time we have this war inside of us. And she says here, Arjuna was in the embodied soul, she says, and she explains about those inner aspects which she defines as the uncontrolled horses. They pull us hither and thither, she says. In its mad quest for enjoyment, our mind goes bananas, basically. So Arjuna, the embodied soul, was faced with a violent crisis, this big war, that seemed quite incompatible with his aspirations for a spiritual life, or even for moral life. Because this war, if you study what happened in this war, it started with all participants being very high with their morals, because they are still in Dvapara Yuga. But the end of the war and the conclusion of the life of all the participants, and eventually even Krishna leaves this world, not in the war, but years later. At that point, we had a shift to Kali Yuga. So from some level of spirituality to almost no level of spirituality as we shift. So she says here that he even had aspirations for spiritual life and even a moral life. But doing this war was like a mark of the shift to a less moral and even immoral life that will characterize the lives of all of us in Kali Yuga, in this Iron Age. When you say, oh, but I'm a moral person, trust me, if we look at all really how we operate in this life, we are not immoral. We're not moral as much as we think. You might say, but I am a very moral person. Okay, question. Have you ever lied? Who of us have not told a lie? At least, once a day. How do you feel today? Oh, I'm fine. Actually, you're not fine. You just lied. Yes, we excuse it. We say it's a white lie. We're just trying to be polite. Or I don't want to get in trouble with my boss. Or I don't want my child to do this or that, so I told a little lie. And you might say, so what? Lying is not a big deal. No, it's not a big deal. It's just an immoral life. And that's just the beginning of it. If we start analyzing our lives a little bit deeper, I didn't even try. That took me a second. If we go a little bit deeper, we are full of immoral choices during our life. And therefore, Arjuna was starting to notice the yugas are shifting. This war makes us into less spiritual human beings. But he had the sense to realize, she says here, that by himself he was helpless. And therefore, he had given over the reins of his life, like the reins that you hold to drive the horses. He gave those reins of his life into the capable and willing hands of his divine charioteer, who steered him through this dangerous battle with ease, protected him, and led him to a glorious victory. That is Krishna, of course. So this Bhagavad Gita is teaching us that by letting go of our need to control our life from the ego, from the impure part of our mind, from the intellect, which is always also going in very weird directions, and we can go into that, but just leave it at that for now. And all the other factors of our mind are going in such weird ways. But if she says, you see, this is the beauty of the Bhagavad Gita. It teaches us how to let the drive force be something higher. Krishna, the Krishna principle, the higher consciousness. And when you learn how to do that, and the Bhagavad Gita teaches you, even if you don't know anything about spirituality, it takes you step by step to the solution. And if you learn how to do that, you are the most wise human being ever, because you put your, direction in the hands of the Supreme Consciousness. And when you do that, you will always win, and gloriously, just like Arjuna did in that war. Do you want to win the war of this life? And make no mistake, it is a war. In Kali Yuga, in this dark age, it is a constant struggle. And there can be so many different issues coming, and we struggle and we struggle. Instead of trying to do it yourself, which will not work, I guarantee, maybe you'll have some success, but there'll be a lot of failures. There's a wise solution here, and that is realize that there's a higher force. Surrender to that force. Let that force guide you. And when you do that, you suddenly have success. And you know what? It becomes even effortless. Because whatever you think the efforts may be for you, for God, it is a freaking breeze. It's a walk in the park. It's like eating a cake. What else can I tell you? It's easy. Easy peasy lemon squeezy. You want it? You can get it. You just need to use the teachings of the Bhagavad Gita. So a few more words from her before we conclude. She says here, in all their years of friendship, Arjuna had never thought of turning to Krishna for advice because he had always considered himself competent to solve his own problems. Now, at that crucial hour when he should have been at the peak of his mental and physical powers, he's about to go to war to lead a huge army. You need to be sharp and you need to be full on. At this point, he found himself a wreck, his mind torn and perplexed as to his duty, and his body becomes weak and helpless, and he is basically in a puddle on the floor. She continues, Only then did he think of turning to the Lord, to Krishna. And having surrendered his ego, remember, in spirituality, you need to surrender your ego, not to every Tom, Dick, and Harry, to God, to Krishna, to Jesus, to the Supreme, whatever name you want to give it. When you surrender, as he did, surrendered his ego, he begged him to come to his aid. The Lord within us, who is our boon companion, waits patiently for us to play out our game of make-believe as a sole hero of our life's drama. He waits patiently until the day dawns when we stumble and realize that without the director, we are helpless. Only then do we turn to him for help. At this point, the Lord rushes to us like a loving mother, points out the clear-cut path of duty, assists us to avoid the forces of evil, and even carries us across the treacherous cross-currents of life, if necessary. He just does it by carrying you in his hands. The message of the Gita is thus addressed to the fighter, the person of action, for whom life is a battlefield, as it is for all of us. She continues here. This is a very beautiful text, and I think by now you start getting the flavor of it. What is the Bhagavad Gita? It's not just some funny Indian text that we read and we're full of weird language that we don't understand. The most amazing manual you can ever lay your hands on to really transform you as a human being, to align you with your dharma. Dharma means the purpose of your life, the justified purpose of your life, what your life is all about. It helps you to fight the negative forces, to recognize them, eliminate them easily, because you are in the hands of the divine charioteer that now takes you forwards with ease. How many of us want to have this kind of success with ease? Most of us feel that success can only come through hard work, failures, suffering, sweating blood is the only way to succeed. You work. That's how it should be done. Not really. If you just say, you know what? God, take over. Krishna, take over. I'm not just saying be silly, sit and do nothing. There's a method to it, and we teach it in this course as we analyze the Bhagavad Gita. There are specific methodologies. There's a way of doing it. And when you learn how to do it and you start applying it consciously, then not only that the effort becomes effortless, but also it becomes beautiful. Wouldn't you want your life to be a beautiful, harmonious journey instead of a non-stop upstream CrossFit fight all the time, fighting for every step? When you succeed a little bit, then you fail a little bit. Things are going well, now they're not going well. Did you have enough? Because there is a way to do this properly. And that's what the Bhagavad Gita is all about. Time to read the manual and imbibe this knowledge, apply it, and start making profits, spiritual profits, even practical profits. Your life can change dramatically.
I have one question, Soma, for you to kind of start with. One of the pivotal moments in the Bhagavad Gita described there for Arjuna in particular is when he indeed collapses, so to speak, seeing the desperation of the situation and has this major doubts and everything, and yet he manages to come out of it as to the help of Krishna, essentially. To me, that represents a little bit like situations that people have in life as well, struggles, pains, doubts, desperate situations. What can we learn from Arjuna's example and him overcoming his doubts? What can we learn for our daily life when we find ourselves in challenging and very desperate situations?
Well, it's a very good question, and it does require, however, that we study some of the texts already in the Bhagavad Gita to really get some of these answers. But what I can say, first and foremost, Krishna explains that one of the main problems we have, like you said, we're struggling, we have some crisis perhaps, or some, doubts in our lives, stuff is happening, and we don't know what to do. we're perplexed, we're stressed, we're upset, we're basically having a lot of issues. Sometimes this can be major crises for a lot of us. What can we do here? What Krishna is teaching, again, without going to too many details, is that happens. These feelings come up. All the stress, all the problems we encounter are happening, not because you have an actual problem, but because you are in a state of ignorance. And I know it doesn't make sense to some of you, because you know what? How can you call me an ignorant? I've got 2 PhDs and I'm a very smart person, and I read books and I've got a high IQ, and whatever people think is justifiable. None of that is relevant. We're not talking about your IQ level. What we're talking about, and what Krishna refers to here when he says ignorance, is that we do not understand our true nature, not at all, and we act in an ignorant manner, and we react in an ignorant manner to the circumstances of life we encounter. Beautiful thing here is that when you understand the mechanisms that Krishna is teaching in the Bhagavad Gita, then when you start applying them, the ignorance is dispelled. And when it's dispelled, then you look at what's happening and you smile. And you actually not just smile because you are just being cold or, just distant. You smile because things start working completely differently. You manifest a different reality, for lack of better terms. Shakespeare himself, the famous Shakespeare, was touching upon it, not as deep as the Bhagavad Gita, not even close, but as much as he could have touched upon it, not being an enlightened person. Here in the Hamlet play, there's a moment there where some people talk, some characters speak to each other, and they say something very beautiful. They say, there is no good or bad. It is the thinking that makes it so. Think about this sentence. It's very profound. It's not what happens that is actually important. It is our reaction to it. And this is incredible when you learn how to apply it. This is, in fact, one of the basic tenets of the Stoic philosophy from ancient Greece. Stoicism is exactly about how we react to life, how we react to circumstances. That is what actually determines our lives, and not what actually happened. This idea is taken in the Bhagavad Gita to a whole new level, where Krishna is teaching in much more profound details and from a very spiritual point of view how you can understand your reality better, how you can apply certain mental functions to your reality, and then how your reality will behave differently with you. And you can even change your reality. It puts the law of attraction to shame, because that's for losers, really, compared to what the Bhagavad Gita is talking about. This is a giant level of knowledge of how human beings should interact with their reality, understand their own soul, their own mind, their own intellect, their own body, and how they should apply this knowledge. So I know it still is a little bit abstract. You would love to hear me saying 1, 2, 3, this is what you need to do. But for that, we need to study the Bhagavad Gita and really understand it. Otherwise, I will do disservice to you by just giving a quick summary or summing up a couple of principles without reading the text and drinking straight from the fountain, which is the mouth of Shiva, of, in this case, Krishna. Krishna, Shiva, in this case, we're talking about the same supreme consciousness. I always recommend people to read the Bhagavad Gita, even if they have no previous knowledge, and maybe they will struggle through it perhaps, or stumble because they don't know certain texts, certain words in Sanskrit, or certain methodologies don't make sense. You don't have the code to decode these levels of the Bhagavad Gita teaching. It's understandable. Nobody can promise you success every single time you read it, but don't stop reading it nevertheless. I recommend to keep on studying it. It is so uniquely made that even without proper guidance and knowledge, even if you're a beginner, let's say a beginner who is not even well adjusted, a confused beginner, still it's useful to study it. It's so healing and so powerful that even if you read partial parts of it, and even if you're in a confused state, it will still give you something very positive. That's how beautiful it is. I just want to say that for me personally, the Bhagavad Gita and the teachings of the Bhagavad Gita are some of the most dear to my heart. I consider them so valuable, so powerful, so important. Trust me, it is the case. I've done so much, read so much, practiced so many different techniques and methodologies, and yet the Bhagavad Gita is one of the top teachings that I can recommend to anyone. It is such a beautiful, enlightening text. So I'm very happy to have had the chance to talk to you about it, share my passion with you about the Bhagavad Gita, and I hope you felt that excitement and it was interesting for you. And if I inspired you to read this text, which you can get anywhere, and you had a few options recommended by us to you already, what you can read, then go ahead, do it, read it, and I hope you'll enjoy. If you are one of those people who want to really extract the value of it and apply it in your daily life, you really want to use it for powerful results, then we have this course available, and you're very welcome to join us there. So that's what I wanted to share. I'm very happy to have had a chance to chat with you and do this live event here. Otherwise, I hope all of you have benefited from it and that we'll meet again soon. Thank you, and have a beautiful day or night wherever you are.